Hello, government students. In our last lessons, we talked about the political parties in America, we talked about the election process, and now I want to talk about the role of money in elections. And you may recall that one of the most important functions of a political party is to raise money, and of course that money is then spent in elections. So let's get started with the role of money in elections. First of all, let's look at the source of campaign funds, the source of the money. A candidate can use his or her own wealth, and this is especially true in state and local races where you had, for example, in Illinois, our current governor, Pritzker, used a lot of his own money in running for governor, and his predecessor, Bruce Rauner, the Republican, also was a very, very wealthy man who used a lot of his money in running for governor. In fact, the election between Pritzker and Rauner was, at that time at least, the most expensive gubernatorial election ever in the United States because both of those men were extremely wealthy, using a lot of their own wealth in the election. Private givers also contribute money, and that private givers can include individuals like you and me. It can also include some public funds. There is public money that individuals can allocate when they do their income taxes to go to an election fund, and candidates have the ability to draw from public funds under some restrictions. And there are also something called political action committees, or PACs for short. Then this was the traditional way that corporations and unions have contributed to political campaigns. And finally, there is now something called a super PAC. That's sort of a colloquial term. The actual legal term is non-connected committee. And super PACs began forming in 2010 after a Supreme Court decision, which, as a result of that Supreme Court decision, changed a lot of the ways that campaign money was being spent in the United States. And we'll get into that in more detail here in just a second. There are some campaign donation limits. For individuals, I cannot, and you cannot donate more than $2,600 to a single candidate in a particular election, nor can you donate more than $30,800 to a national party election committee. So, for example, the most I could donate to the Republican National Committee for the 2022 election would be $30,800, and then I could donate up to that amount, and then the Republican Party could distribute that money however that party saw fit. I can donate up to $10,000 to a state or local party committee, and I can donate up to $5,000 per year to a single political action committee, to a single PAC. These PACs, I want to make sure you understand, will support a particular candidate or a particular political party. Now, this $5,000 limit was partly overturned by the Supreme Court in 2010. We'll get into that here in just a minute. PACs themselves can donate money. The PAC can donate $5,000 to a single candidate per election, or up to $15,000 per political party per year. That's not very much money. And corporations and unions have a whole lot more money than that. So they're really limited on how much they can spend politically. Now, we do have a lot of single candidates running. You know, there are candidates running all over the United States. So if a political action committee wants to donate to 50 candidates, that starts to be real money. But only $5,000 to a specific candidate or $15,000 to a specific political party. Now, I've made reference a couple of times to the Supreme Court decision in 2010 that changed the way political action committees work. And that that court case is one whose name I want you to remember. It's the Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Committee. We oftentimes just refer to it as the Citizens United case. And that was decided in 2010. And here's how the court decided. The court said that political spending by individuals is a type of free speech protected by the First Amendment. Remember, we have symbolic speech, and political spending is considered symbolic speech, which is protected by the First Amendment. You cannot limit free speech. Thus, you can't really limit political spending by individuals. Corporations and unions are artificial persons by law, And they have some of the same First Amendment protections as individuals. Okay, so a corporation is treated in some ways just like a person when looking at their constitutional rights that are protected in the Bill of Rights, especially the First Amendment. Now, the court did say that it is okay to limit donations directly to a campaign, that $2,600 limit that I mentioned earlier, or the $5,000 limit for a political action committee to a specific campaign. And the court said it's okay to keep corporations and unions from contributing directly to a candidate, so they still have to contribute to the political action committee, to the PAC. Okay, so that's the basic gist, but within what I've just described here, there's a lot of loopholes, okay? And so let's look at how this is going to work out in the real world, what it really means. What Citizens United did is create a new kind of PAC, which we call a super PAC. Again, that's the colloquial name for an unconnected committee, but it's a super PAC. There's no limit to the amount of money that one can give to a super PAC. There is a limit to the amount of money you can give to a traditional PAC, but not to a super PAC. Super PACs can spend unlimited amounts of money on independent campaign activities. What does that mean? Independent campaign activities means that it can't be directly coordinating its activities with a specific candidate. The super PAC can support a specific candidate and can support him by name, but they cannot work with that candidate's own campaign in developing the message that they're delivering about that candidate. The super PAC is not allowed to donate to a campaign, so they have to spend that money independently. They can't give it to the campaign. Super PACs cannot coordinate their activities with the candidate's campaign, which I just discussed. That's getting into this idea of independent campaign activities. Now, there's no regulations about who can run a super PAC, and oftentimes former campaign officials will run a super PAC. So, for example, I could have been a member of the Joe Biden for President committee, okay, working on his campaign. I could have even been the head of the Joe Biden campaign, and then I could decide to quit Joe Biden's campaign and start running a super PAC that supports Joe Biden. In this situation, do I need to coordinate my campaign message with the Biden campaign? Of course I do not, because I know what Biden's strategy is. I used to be the one that formulated the strategy. Now I know the strategy, and I can run my super PAC in such a way that it very much meshes with what the Biden campaign wants to do, because I used to be a worker on that Biden campaign. You can see this is kind of a loophole on this idea of independent activity. When anyone can run a super PAC, that independent aspect kind of becomes meaningless. Love this cartoon. As a result of the Citizens United decision, there's been lots and lots and lots of more money being put into the political campaign process. And as you can see, the concern here is all this money might be drowning justice, Lady Liberty, and perhaps giving too much power to moneyed interest in America. Speaking of that, let's look and see how super PACs have impacted the amount of money spent. The Citizens United decision happened in 2010, and you can see the spending in 2008, spending in 2004 and 2000 were not too far different than what we saw in 2008. But then you see the spending increase pretty significantly in 2012 and 2016, and my goodness, look what happened in 2020. 2020 was an election in which over $14 billion were spent in that election cycle, a huge amount of money. Think what that money could do if spent in other ways for mankind, but it was spent on political campaigning. You also see how it's split among Democrats and Republicans. It's interesting. Democrats usually, not always, but usually get a little bit more money than the Republicans. And most Democratic money actually comes from small donations. And Republicans tend to get their money from larger donations. By small donations, I mean donations of less than $200 per individual. And so you can see the result there, but it's a lot of money, a lot of money. And let's finish off with this little cartoon here. Kind of love this cartoon. You see over here in the bottom right, that's a Supreme Court justice. and this is the public, and the public wants to have their voice heard, so they have this little megaphone here. But the super PACs are gathering money from huge corporations, and a huge corporation like Microsoft or Apple or AT&T has a whole lot more money than you or I have, and so that corporate money going to the super PACs clearly can drown out the voice of the guy here who represents individuals like you and me. Some people are worried that that Citizens United case has given way more power to the wealthy interest in our country and to corporations than was previously the case. With that, I'm going to stop this presentation on money. We will do an exercise, an assignment dealing with money in the election cycle. Check Canvas. I'm not sure if that's going to be today or tomorrow. So with that, I'm signing off. You guys have a great day.